All right, let's get right to it. Do you have nuclear weapons?
What was the question?
It is often seen that when someone doesn't want to answer a question or address a problem, they try to divert attention. Here is an example I love quoting.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Are you developing nuclear weapons?
No, I literally can't hear you.
I'm going to another question.
Oh, I can hear you now.
And given that it hasn't been a week since Alpha flopped, the announcement of Alia Bhatt joining the cast of Tumbbad 2 can be construed as a diversion tactic.
अब हम इसको घुमाएंगे.
After all, Bollywood and its PR strategy is,
हमको नहीं पता. हमको कुछ नहीं पता.
if you look back at Alia Bhatt's filmography, every time she has tried something first time, it has been a mixed bag. And now Alia Bhatt has signed her first horror film, Sohum Shah's Tumbbad 2, which was announced via an Instagram post. And please don't get me wrong, I'm not here to defend Alpha or Alia Bhatt or to explain why this announcement is happening at such an opportune time. Instead, I want to directly address the elephant in the room by asking a simple question: why now, and what could be the potential impact on Tumbbad 2 considering the questionable narrative around Alia Bhatt? Even though this is Alia's first stab at a horror film, it is also the first big challenge for Sohum Shah, given the overwhelming acceptance of Tumbbad.
क्योंकि ऐसी फिल्म हिंदुस्तान से बनी नहीं है. इस जॉनरा की कोई फिल्म नहीं है. इट्स नॉट अ हॉरर फिल्म.
For cinema buffs out there, you will know that when Tumbbad was released in 2018, it grossed close to 16 crores, just enough to cover its budget. Through word of mouth and OTT streaming, the film gained a cult following and is considered one of the best Hindi horror films. And when the movie was re-released in 2024, it grossed 38 crores, more than double its budget, and became the second highest grossing re-released Indian film. So naturally, after this happened, Sohum Shah announced the expansion of the Tumbbad lore with a scaled up production and a budget to build a dark cinematic universe.
हमने राम से ब्रदर्स की 3 फिल्मों के राइट्स लिए हुए हैं, तो हम भी एक्सप्लोर कर रहे हैं. यूनिवर्स का आइडिया थोड़ा सा नया है हमारे लिए. क्या पता राम से ब्रदर्स के साथ अटैच हो जाए.
And I will talk more about Tumbbad later in the video, because first we need to talk about the remnants of Alpha, whatever is left behind, followed by the PR strategy to cover up the losses via diversion tactics.
हम यहाँ अल्फा प्रमोट करने नहीं आए हैं.
तो निकालो टॉपी फिर.
नहीं.
On paper, Alpha had everything going for it, but that was before Dhurandhar came in and basically finished the YRF spy universe.
क्योंकि इस फिल्म जब रिलीज होगी तो एक जॉनर ऑफ फिल्म मेकिंग मुझे लगता है इंडियन सिनेमा में खत्म हो जाएगा.
Jokes aside, the spy universe that is Tiger, Kabir and Pathan was finally getting its first female lead chapter. This was not a random film, it was marketed as this grand cinematic event, and yet when the numbers came in, they were not just disappointing, they were alarming. For a franchise film with this kind of IP behind it, Alpha underperformed in a way that raises a much bigger question than just one bad opening weekend. Because here is the thing about franchise films, when they work, they compound. Each film is a deposit into a shared account, and Alpha was supposed to be a deposit. That is the entire logic of a cinematic universe, though honestly, the spy universe is technically not a universe.
Oh, I'm sorry, did I break your concentration?
Now here is a detail I want you to pay attention to, and I mean really pay attention, because this is the part everyone is skipping over in the post-mortems. Alia Bhatt did not just give 3 years of her career to Alpha, she gave up Ramayana for it.
But that's simply not possible.
Why not, you stupid?
Ramayana is the most anticipated Indian movie in a long time. Nitesh Tiwari directing, Ranbir Kapoor as Lord Ram, and Alia Bhatt was in talks to play Ma Sita, a role that would have placed her at the center of a very culturally significant Indian film. But she had to step away because of scheduling conflicts with Alpha. She made a calculated bet and chose the spy franchise, and it didn't work out. Now, I am not saying this to be cruel. I genuinely believe she made the call she thought was right at the time. In an interview with Kareena Kapoor, Alia did mention her desire to try the action genre.
But there was this कीड़ा inside me कि यार I want to myself see what I look like doing action, because it'll be not believable.
But the weight of that decision is the entire context for everything that follows in this video. Because when you make a bet that big and it goes wrong, the pressure to course correct becomes immense. And here is what really complicates this. If you understand how Bollywood's relationship with perception works, you understand how quickly that damage can harden into a narrative. The narrative forming right now is simple and brutal. Alia Bhatt's solo commercial films do not work. Now I agree that Gangubai worked and that Darlings was appreciated. Sanjay Leela Bhansali worked his magic as he always does, and Darlings, being a small, more contained story, showcased the nuances of Alia's acting, which we saw in movies like Highway, Dear Zindagi and Udta Punjab. But after this, Jigra failed, and now Alpha. The moment you put Alia Bhatt alone at the center of a big commercial film with big commercial expectations, something goes wrong. That is the narrative forming, and in Bollywood, narratives are everything. So now the real question is, what would you do if you were Alia Bhatt's team and faced this situation? What would you do when you are YRF and one of your biggest franchise bets has just come undone? You do what Bollywood has always done. You change the story.
पर इस बार सीता आज लंका खुद जलाने आई.
In Bollywood, announcements are not just news, they are strategic weapons. They are deployed with precision and timing. And if you have been watching this industry for long enough, you start to see the pattern everywhere. A film struggles at the box office, critics' reviews come in harshly, word of mouth turns, and within days, sometimes within hours, something new gets announced. A new project, a new collaboration, a surprise casting, a leaked exclusive. And suddenly, every film journalist and every fan account is talking about the new thing. The old thing gets buried, not because it went away, but the new thing gave everyone something more interesting to talk about. Basically, in Bollywood PR, the cure for bad news is louder, newer news. Now, some people might say I'm connecting dots that aren't to be connected. Maybe the Tumbbad 2 casting discussion was going on for months and the announcement is just a coincidence. And here is my response to that. I hear you. This deal wasn't made in a week. Tumbbad 2 is a serious creative project. Sohum Shah is a serious filmmaker. Deals like this do not happen over one phone call after a bad opening weekend. But here is what I want you to understand. The deal does not need to be manufactured. The announcement absolutely can be timed. You have the contract signed. You have the confirmation ready. You have a PR team sitting on this information, waiting for the right moment. And the right moment is not random. The right moment is chosen. And they chose 5 days after Alpha's numbers became undeniable. That is not a coincidence. That is a decision. And this is not even unique to Bollywood. This is how every entertainment industry in the world operates. It is basically PR 101. When damaging news is unavoidable, you shift the narrative by masking it with another news, a more curious news.
You're goddamn right.
Now here is a part that I find genuinely interesting. This announcement works on 2 levels simultaneously, making it a very elegant move. Level 1, it is exciting on its own terms. Alia Bhatt in Tumbbad 2 is a genuinely surprising casting choice. It creates curiosity, it generates a debate, it gets people who were never going to talk about Alpha's failure at all to talk. People who love Tumbbad, skeptical people and excited people, all of them are now in a conversation that has nothing to do with Alpha's performance. Level 2, it repositions Alia Bhatt overnight. She goes from the lead of a flop spy film to the newest cast member of one of the most beloved cult films in recent Indian cinema history. The association changes completely, the story changes completely. As a PR move, I give it respect. It is extremely well executed. But here is where I have a problem. The film used to execute this move is Tumbbad 2, and Tumbbad 2 is not a marketing asset. It is not a PR vehicle. It is a sequel to a film that a small dedicated team spent years building from a pure creative conviction, with no safety net, with no big stars, with nothing but work, and now it has been conscripted into someone else's narrative reset. That is the conflict I want you to hold on to as we go into the next chapter. Because to truly understand why that matters, I need to take you back to where Tumbbad came from. Because I think many of you, especially those who discovered it through the re-releases, may not fully feel the weight of what was built. And this is why, to understand the risk truly, it is important to understand exactly what Tumbbad is, how it was built, and why it became what it became. If you have not seen Tumbbad, rest assured that the rest of the video contains no spoilers.
सोजा वरना हस्तर आ जाए नाम लेने से भी आता है क्या
6 years. That is how long Tumbbad was in development before it reached theaters. 6 years from conception to release. For context, most commercial Bollywood films are made in under a year. Even ambitious, big budget productions rarely take more than 2 years. So 6 years is a big time frame. Rahi Anil Barve began developing the film in 2012, working from a short story by Narayan Dharap, a Marathi writer whose work sits in a very specific corner of Indian literary horror. The mythology of the Hastar, the firstborn son of the goddess of prosperity, banished for his greed so completely that even the gods erased his name from their memory, was not just a plot device, it was a philosophical engine. The entire film runs on one question: what does greed do to a film across generations? That is literary fiction being translated into cinema. And Sohum Shah, who at that point was known primarily as a producer and a behind-the-scenes operator, saw something in this project that most people in the industry would have passed on immediately. No big star, period horror, a rural Maharashtra setting that mainstream audiences are not familiar with, a villain that is more mythology than monster, an ending that refuses to be comforting in any conventional sense. The commercial logic of Tumbbad does not add up, and that's why on paper this film should not exist. But Sohum Shah produced it as well as starred in it, and the fact that he did both is the key to understanding everything that followed. When you are the producer and the lead actor simultaneously, nobody can compromise your vision without your direct consent. The director answers to you, the studio answers to you. The film you make is the film you intended to make from the very beginning. Tumbbad is exactly the film its creators wanted to make. Every frame, every decision, that uncompromised quality is what the audience felt when they watched it. Believe me when I say this, you cannot manufacture that feeling. It does not come from a bigger budget or a more famous cast. It comes from a creative conviction that was never diluted by external pressure.
बस यही कहानियां हर युग में बार बार सुनाई जाती हैं। ऐसी ही हमारी भी एक कहानी है जिसे दोहराने का समय फिर आ गया है।
When the movie was first released in 2018, it opened to modest numbers, but over the next few weeks, positive word of mouth spread, and it quickly became the movie you need to see before you know anything about it. Over time, the movie built a cult following, not the kind manufactured by a PR agency, but a genuine, organic one. With OTT streaming, that community grew quietly for 6 years, and then when the re-release happened in 2024, Tumbbad returns to theaters, and the numbers it did were extraordinary for a 6-year-old film, marking a genuine legacy. And the person most responsible for protecting that legacy now is Sohum Shah, who has spent the years since Tumbbad speaking about the sequel with a specific kind of careful intention. He has never rushed it, he has never promised more than he could deliver. When he speaks about Tumbbad 2, he sounds like someone who genuinely understands the responsibility he is carrying.
तुम्बाड़ 2 की स्क्रिप्ट लिखते हुए मैं 6 साल हो, जब तुम्बाड़ आई थी तब से उसकी स्क्रिप्ट लिखी जा रही है। मुझे वो फिल्म नहीं बनानी थी जो सिर्फ तुम्बाड़ की सफलता पे राइड। तुम्बाड़ चली इसके लिए प्लान नहीं था, हमारा पहले से प्लान हुआ अगर ट्रिलॉजी बन सकती है, इस पे एक रीबूट बन सकता है।
And that trust is the single most valuable asset Tumbbad 2 has as it goes into production. And this brings us to the question this entire video has been building towards. What happens when you introduce into the center of all that a mainstream Bollywood star whose own recent film's PR narrative is part of the reason she's in this project right now? What happens to Sohum Shah's creative authority? What happens to the Tumbbad community's trust? And what happens to a film about greed when the casting itself looks like a commercial calculation?
Bolo, bolo, tell.
I will present both sides, and it is for you to decide which one you relate to more. On one side, it is because Alia Bhatt is a genuinely good actor. Gangubai Kathiawadi is one of the finest screen performances in Hindi cinema in the last decade.
शक्ति, संपत्ति, सद्बुद्धि ये तीनों ही औरतें हैं, तो इन मर्दों को किस बात का गुरूर?
Not just technically, emotionally. She disappeared into that character in a way that very few actors at her commercial level are willing or able to do. Darling showed a range that her masala films never asked for. The craft is undeniably there when she is given real material to work with. Second point, and this is the one I find most interesting. Post Alpha, Alia Bhatt is hungry. After that commercial disappointment, she needs a win measured not by opening weekend numbers but by credibility and respect. A critically acclaimed, creatively serious film would do more for her long-term legacy than any number of franchise hits. And honestly, desperation sometimes produces the best performances. If she commits to this role the way she committed to Gangubai, what comes out the other side could be genuinely remarkable. Third, practically speaking, her name brings Tumbbad to an opening weekend it would not have on its own. The Tumbbad cult is passionate, but it is a niche by mainstream standards. Adding Alia Bhatt's fanbase to that equation means sequel reaches audiences who have never seen the original. Some of those people will fall in love with the world and become part of the community. Tumbbad 2 with a stronger opening means a longer theatrical run, which means more people discovering it organically. I hear all of that, and I mean genuinely. But here is where it gets complicated, and this is the part I cannot get past no matter how many times I think about it. Tumbbad worked because it had no mainstream gravity pulling at it from the inside, and I want you to really think about what I mean by that. When you have a big star in a film, the entire infrastructure around the film changes because now you have an actor with a market image that needs to be managed. You have a fan base with expectations that need to be served, and on top of that you have baggage, a very negative perception baggage that needs to be managed. Now the Tumbbad ending isn't comfortable, not to spoil anything, but there is a lot to tell in that story. Now Alia Bhatt is at that table, and when a star of her commercial standing is at that table, certain conversations become unavoidable. Not because she does not care about the craft, but because the commercial ecosystem around an actor of her level has its own logic. That logic prioritizes audience satisfaction, market image protection, and commercial safety. Those are exactly the things that the Tumbbad creative framework was built to resist. In simpler terms, Sohum Shah made Tumbbad because he had total control. The question for Tumbbad 2 is whether he still has that control. I am not yet confident the answer is yes. Finally, and this might be the most important point of everything I have said today, the Tumbbad community. This community was built on a very specific feeling, the feeling of having found something the mainstream missed. And it came with a sort of ownership. That feeling of ownership, of being part of a group that recognized something extraordinary before the world caught up, is at the core of what a cult is. When you mainstream a cult property, you do not simply add new fans, you fundamentally change what the thing is. And this is not irrational. That has been the documented history of every cult property absorbed into the commercial machine. So where do I actually land? Honestly, Sohum Shah is one of the most underrated creative minds working in Indian cinema today. Absolute conviction, absolute clarity of vision. If anyone can walk this tightrope and still deliver a film that is worthy of the Tumbbad name, it is Sohum Shah. He has earned that trust over and over again. But the tightrope is tighter than it has ever been. The question is not whether Alia Bhatt can deliver a great performance in this film. She can. The question is whether Tumbbad 2 will still be a Tumbbad film by the time all the commercial forces around this casting have had their say. Whether the ending will be allowed to be comfortable, whether the mythology will be allowed to remain strange, dark and unresolved, whether Sohum Shah can protect the vision the way he did the first time, now that the stakes are infinitely higher and the table has far more people at it.
पर हमने उसे जगाया ही क्यों?
क्योंकि हस्तर का शाप हमारे लिए वरदान है.
That is my take on what Alia Bhatt's casting in Tumbbad 2 actually means and what it could cost the most loved Hindi horror film in recent times. What do you think of Alia Bhatt's casting for Tumbbad 2? Do you think Sohum Shah can still protect the vision? Let me know your theories in the comments below. Subscribe if you haven't already and check out our latest video on the Mirzapur movie right here. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.